Hey everyone, welcome back to Strange Minds 6. I'm your host Ruby, and today we're going to be reading chapter 18 of Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by New York Times bestselling author Shea Earnshaw. And as always, I would like to ask if you could please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I would truly appreciate it. And yeah, comment any suggestions or any other books that you would like for me to read. I can go through them and then just to see which is the top best liked book, I will see if I can go ahead and get and then read it. But without further ado, grab your snacks, grab your drink, and let's get into it, shall we? Chapter 18. The Sandman snores deeply, halfway slumped against the edge of the fountain, robes soaked with green potion water, while Zero sniffs at his white hair to be sure he's truly asleep. Relief swells inside me like a carnival balloon, too large for my chest to contain. Zero flits back to my side, and I run my palms down his ghostly fur, then rub his ears. You did good. My insides are a mess of tangled up leaves and nerves, wanting to cry and shout and laugh all at once, wanting oddly enough to sleep. I've put the Sandman to sleep, but I can't be sure it will break whatever sleeping spells he has cast on all the towns and even the human world. I have stopped him, but I don't know if I have saved anyone. I squint across the town square and beyond the fountain through the dazzling late morning sunlight. There is movement. I squint. There is movement. Helgamine begins to stir. Her long, spiked fingers wiggle, nose twitching. At the steps of the town hall, the mayor rises slowly, squinting, rubbing his eyes, then spinning his scowling face around to rub at his other set of eyes. The four vampire brothers rise to their feet, blinking at the ghastly daylight. The vampire prince turns his head to one side, cracking his neck. What an awful night of sleep, he proclaims, lifting his black umbrella to shield his face from the morning sun. I had the worst dream, Helgamine remarks from the other side of the town square, helping Zeldaborn up from where she had been slumped in the doorway of their shop. I dreamt that we lost all of our warts and that two handsome princes have fallen in love with us. Yuck, Zeldaborn says. Sounds more like a nightmare. But after that, I had no dream at all, Helgamine adds, scratching the tip of her long nose. It was just darkness. I can't remember any of dreams either, Zeldaborn answers. Me either, replies the mayor, his face jerking around to show his deep scowl. The residents of Halloween Town are stirring, but they are groggy-eyed and sore from sleeping in odd, bone-bent places. They mutter around the darkness they felt while they slept, the deep sense of falling into a bottomless black hole. A feeling worse than death, the wolfman remarks, scratching behind one of his ears with his paw. The Sandman is asleep. He's no longer stealing their dreams. And now they're all waking up. The leaves in my chest roar against my fabric ribs. My eyes flash away from the Sandman, and I run up the street toward home. Zero, right behind me. I push through the iron gate, darting up at the stone steps. And through the front door, letting it slam back against the wall. At the top of the spiral stairs, I find Jack in our room, but he's still asleep. I sink down beside him, taking his hand in mine. "Jack," I whisper at the back of my throat. "Wake up." He doesn't move. "Please, Jack." My hand begins to tremble. No. The others are awake. Why isn't he? I bend over him, pressing my mouth to his. "Please," I mutter against his lips. "I don't want to be alone anymore." And this time, I feel him stirring beneath me, his hand squeezing mine. Then his fingertips are in my long ragdoll hair. He kisses me back, tears streaming down my cheek, dripping onto his bone-cold face. "What's wrong, my wife?" he asks. "Why are you crying?" He wipes at the tears with his fingertips, but they continue to fall on the bed, coating the blanket like dewdrops. "I didn't know if you'd ever wake up." He rises slowly, still holding my hand, and leans forward at the edge of the bed. "I had the deepest sleep, but no dreams at all." And then he pauses, looking over at me. "I could hear your voice in the darkness calling out to me." Zero flits around the bed, barking happily to see Jack awake, and Jack strokes his skeleton hand along Zero's white fur. I try to wipe the tears away, but more come to take their place. "You were asleep, Jack, for many days," I tell him, nearly choking on the words and looking away to the window, remembering everything that's happened since our honeymoon. All the other realms I've seen, my time in Dreamtown, my parents. "Something happened," I say softly. "I found a new door behind the hinterland grove, and I accidentally left it open." Jack's eyes brightened, and he drops his hand from Zero. You found a new door? Where does it lead?" I swallow, feeling a new ache rising up into my throat, and the loss that comes with it. "A place called Dreamtown." "How wonderful!" Jack stands up from the bed, blinking down at me. But I shake my hand. "I set loose a monster, the Sandman," I confess. "He put you all to sleep, along with everyone in the human world. He was stealing your dreams." The tears start to gather heavy against my eyelids, the fabric unable to contain them. I was the only one still awake, so I went into Dreamtown to find a way to stop him, and the words shatter, slice through me. "Jack, I met my parents. They live in Dreamtown. They're the governors, and I was born there. I was never built by Dr. Finkelstein at all." I swipe at my eyes, brushing away the wetness. "He kidnapped me and brought me here to Halloween Town when I was young." Jack's mouth turns down sharply, anger rising up inside him. "He kidnapped you?" His flattened eyes cut to the doorway, like he's going to dart from our room and go in search for Dr. Finkelstein at this very moment. I never trusted him. Never liked how he treated you. But to think that he kidnapped you. His expression softened a little, eyes lifting. Take me to the doorway, he says. I want to meet your parents. I want to know where you're from. I shake my head, and the hurt finds me again. The gut-deep pain of discovering my parents, then losing them just as quickly, still a fresh wound in my linen heart. They were afraid the Sandman would return to their realm, so they destroyed their grove of trees and their doorway into the human world. I let my eyes fall closed. I can never go back there, never see my parents again. Jack pulls me back into his arms, as if he could absorb the pain and take it away from me. And I know I would do it all over again. I would leave Dreamtown and never return, 1,000 times just to be here with Jack, to touch his face, to feel his ice-cold lips on mine, to have a life with him in his town, to stand beside him as Pumpkin Queen. This is the life I want, the one I'm willing to sacrifice everything for. At last, he looks down at me. Where is the Sandman now? I put him to sleep, I say against Jack's chest. He's in the fountain. You came back here alone to stop him? I nod. I had to put everything right. Jack pulls me tighter against him. He's afraid to let me go. You saved us, he says, but I shake my head. It's my fault the Sandman put you to sleep in the first place. I left the doorway open. I let him into our town and all the others. I almost ruined everything. No, Jack says. You saved Halloween Town. He kisses me again, folding me in his arms. The place I want to stay for 1,000 years. When I first discovered Dreamtown, I wasn't sure where I belonged, where my true home was, but I now know. Sometimes home is a town, a house with 4 walls. Other times, it's 2 hollow eyes and a skull, a skeleton without a heartbeat. It's here, not in Dreamtown or Halloween Town, but in Jack's arms, folded against this hollow skeleton chest, is where I belong. I let the tears stream down my face. I let them bind us together, salt and water and fabric and bone, woven parts of ourselves that become one. After the moment has stretched out and become thin, Jack pulls away and says, "Take me to the tree you found." There's no point, I say again. We can't travel through it. Jack touches my nose with his fingertip and smiles. I want to see it for myself. Back outside, a crowd has gathered around the Sandman still asleep against the side of the stone fountain, his snore like a gale rattling window. The witch sisters fuss with his clothing, as if they're considering stealing his long white robe, while Lock, Chalk, and Barrow poke at his ribs. With sticks, the vampire brothers stand in a tight circle, discussing the matter furtively, seriously. The Sandman's sleeping body is a matter to be dealt with. I feel a sharp sense of relief seeing the residents of Halloween Town rising to their feet after days and days of undreaming slumber. I had so desperately wanted to flee Halloween Town, the people in it, and all the obligations of being queen. But now a new feeling stirs the leaves in my lowest ribs. Joy. It rattles through me, and I find that I can't imagine a life without these ghouls and ghosts and grisly town folks. They are my friends. As awful as they might be, they are my family. But before we decide what should be done with the sleeping Sandman, Jack and I slip away from the borders of town, away from the Sandman and the town square, passing over the narrow ravine bridge into the spiny woods. When we reach the grove of trees, I lead Jack deeper into the forest, where the crescent moon tree stands alone in a thicket separate from the circle of 7 holidays. Vines and shrubs are still knotted around it, threatening to grow back over the doorway and conceal it for another unknown number of years. "You're from this world?" Jack asks, resting a bony hand against the door. "A place called Dreamtown." Zero hovers beside me, watching Jack. I nod. "Yes." Jack touches the doorknob, a golden color, then pulls the door open. I hold my breath, hoping, but inside there is only a dark, carved hole, muted, lifeless. No drowsy wind or scent of lavender and chamomile tea swirling out from inside. The threshold into Dreamtown is long gone. He closes the door again, and I feel the flicker of hope shrivel inside me, grow small and tiny like a pebble. The doorway is dead. Even Jack cannot restore what has been torn down and destroyed. The connection between 2 worlds shattered. There's no way back. I'll never see my parents again. I am a daughter lost, and then found, and then lost again. "I'm sorry," Jack says when he looks back at me, his own expression sunken, like he feels the loss as deeply as I do. He folds his fingers through mine, and we walk back through the woods, the forest creaking and swaying overhead, familiar in its howling in the late autumn chill. We leave the crescent moon tree behind. A worthless tree stands where a doorway once did. We cross the bridge into the cemetery, passing the stone mausoleum where I step through. The doorway from the human world. Jack stops, as if a ghost or a thought has just spirited through him. "How did you know the human world was asleep?" he asks. "I saw it." "You went to the human world?" "Yes." I smile a little. Jack grins too, impish, as though he's unsurprised by my fearlessness. "Which town?" "I'm not sure, but there was a queen, and she was marvelous. I remember the feel of her hand beneath mine, the noble, dignified expression of her features. In the portrait, although she was asleep, I admit, but I imagine she is just as marvelous when she's awake." Jack releases my hand and looks to the mausoleum, cobwebs slung in the upper corners, dead leaves clotted in the doorway. "We should go make sure." "Make sure what?" "That your queen is awake." He glances back at me. "Now that you put the Sandman to sleep, we should make sure the human world has woken up, too." He holds his hand out to me. "You want to come with me?" His face makes an odd expression, like he's keeping a secret. "Sally, you've traveled to much more realms in these last few days than I have in a year. I think you're the one who should lead the way." I step forward and reach out for the door. Jack and I will travel to the human world together. We will see if the queen and her people have woken, and maybe when Halloween arrives in less than a week, I will travel with him then, too. No longer left behind on Halloween night, waiting for him to return. We will mark the holiday together. A king and his queen. I touch the door handle, the same door I passed through only hours earlier, feeling the chill waiting on the other side. The tomb dark air that will swallow us up before I can pull it wide, the door is suddenly being pushed outward toward me. The heavy stone grinds against the earth, a cold, entombed wind rushing out through opening. Zero begins to growl as if certain another villain is about to step into our world. I stagger back, startled, but then stop short, squinting into the dark opening as one figure appears, then another. Two people step through the mausoleum doorway, emerging into our cemetery. I feel my mouth fall open, eyes unblinking. What is... Jack starts, bewilderment etched into the bony lines of his forehead. Two figures step into the sunlight, dusting themselves off as if the journey was perilous, untidy one. My parents are standing before us, looking a little startled by their new surroundings, standing in a graveyard in the Halloween town. Sally? My mom says. Her voice teeters, then falls apart, and before I can manage a single word, she's moving toward me, drawing me into her broad, familiar arms. Her skin smelling of fresh lavender, her eyes wet at the corners. I don't understand, I murmur into her long, coppery hair. I thought you'd destroy the library doorway after I left. She holds me out at arm's length, bottom lip quivering. We convinced the others to wait, she says. If there was a chance you could stop the Sandman, we had to give you time to try. We lost you once, we couldn't do it again. My father chimes in, touching my arm where it's folded around Mom, and we realize it was wrong of us to let you go and face the Sandman alone. You came through the human world, I say, my eyes wide, still trying to understand, to make sense of my parents standing before me. Was everyone still asleep? No, Mom answers. We saw a young man awaken in the cemetery that we passed through to get here. It was rather difficult to avoid being seen during the day, but we managed it. Jack steps forward, shoulders drawn back, arm outstretched. Mr. and Mrs. Governor, he says, I'm Jack Skellington, Sally's husband. It's marvelous to finally meet you. My father takes Jack's hand, shaking it wholeheartedly. Ah, the pumpkinkin. He replies, good, good. But then my father's expression dips. If you're awake too, does this mean the Sandman? I nod. He's asleep in the tower. You're sure? Mom asks, a flickering of hopefulness in her eyes. Come see. Chapter 19. At the town square, everyone is still gathered around the Sandman, prodding him, arguing about what should be done. Everyone, Jack announces when we approach. These are Sally's parents from Dreamtown. The mayor's scowling face puckers down, all jagged teeth and pale lips. Dreamtown? He replies, there's no such place. What are you talking about, Jack? Sally found a new tree while we were all asleep, Jack explains, nodding toward the edge of the town and the forest beyond. Then she and Zero put the Sandman to sleep, saving us all. The witch sisters cease their tugging on the Sandman's robe, casting their eyes on me. like they're not sure if I'm capable of such a thing. And it seems Sally is not from Halloween Town at all. Jack continues. She is from Dreamtown. A wave of gasps passes through the crowd. Zeldaborn faints, but Helgamine makes no move to catch her sister before she hits the ground with a sudden thump. Clown topples from his unicycle, Cyclops blinks his single eye, and Wolfman tilts his head back and lets out a strange, low howl. Behind me, I hear the creaking of metal against the uneven cobblestone. When I turn, Dr. Finkelstein is wheeling himself away from the town square. Dr. Finkelstein, Jack shouts, don't think you can flee so quickly. We're not done with you. Dr. Finkelstein stops abruptly, mouth wrinkled, and peers over his shoulder at Jack, a twitchiness in his jaw, while my parents glare back at him, anger cut into the soft seams of both their faces. He knows there's no escape now. But first, Jack says, turning his attention back to the group, we must decide what we will do with the Sandman. We cannot leave him to sleep in our fountain. We should burn him, Helgamine suggests, lifting a finger in the air. No, let me crush him, Behemoth interjects, stepping forward, eyelids motionless, axe sunken atop his head. Or toss him over a cliff. There are several nods in agreement. The group likes the idea. Yes, let's roll him off a cliff and watch him go splat. Corpse Kid adds, mouth curling into a mischievous grin. The crowd chuckles, loving the image of a flattened Sandman. Jack takes several long, deliberate steps closer to the Sandman, eyeing the sleeping creature. Now, we cannot simply kill him. We can lock him in Dr. Finkelstein's lab, Clown shouts from the back of the group. Dr. Finkelstein grumbles, I don't have room for him. He'll take up too much space. But when Jack shoots him a look, Dr. Finkelstein snaps his mouth shut, realizing that he's in no position to argue. Not anymore. He'll be lucky if he gets to keep living in his observatory once Jack is finished with him and isn't forced to sleep out by the swamp with the frogs. Yet the group seems less excited about the notion of simply locking up the Sandman. They murmur and shrug. They'd prefer a more clever, grisly way to dispose of him. He never puts anyone to sleep again. We could make a stew out of him, Zeldaborn suggests, as she gets to her feet, woken from her fainting spell. Having a big feast at All Halloween party. We're not eating him. Jack shakes his head. He might taste awful. The vampire brothers nod. He will surely have a bitter taste, remarks the vampire prince. Please, Jack, the mayor implores, lifting his small hands toward Jack. Let us decide quickly, so we can move on to other things. Halloween is only a few days away. We wouldn't have time for this. We don't have time for this. Yes, of course, Jack agrees, nodding and scratching at his forehead. Perhaps we should take a vote, the mayor continues, on what should be done with the Sandman. Toss him over a cliff, lock him in the observatory, but the mayor doesn't finish, because there is a stirring of bubbles in the fountain, a churning of water. Everyone takes a step back. From the green surface of the fountain, two copper yellow eyes emerge, blinking, watery. A webbed hand slaps against the edge, dripping. But it's only undersea gal, and she flaps her mermaid fin over the side of the low stone wall. She often likes to nap in the deepest part of the fountain, at the tippy bottom, and she must have been deep enough not to swallow the sleeping potion I poured into the soapy water. Now she slithers out onto the cobstone. What did I miss? She asks, eyeing the Sandman and licking her long tongue, across her fishy blue lips, as if the Sandman were something to be eaten whole. But Jack steps in front of the mayor. The Sandman is the property of Dreamtown. He belongs to them. They will decide what should be done, not us. Jack nods towards my parents, and my father raises an eyebrow, glancing around the crowd of spectators, then says, "The cliff sounds reasonable to us." The crowd cheers, hoots of excitement echoing over the rooftop. Behemoth moves toward the fountain, eager to hoist the Sandman from the water. The hum of anticipation rises. The decision is made. We will march out to the swamp, cliff together, and be rid of the Sandman once and for all. Yet I wonder if this is the ending he deserves. I pick at the frayed seam along my wrist, knowing what the Sandman did is unforgivable and cruel, and if I hadn't stopped him, everyone would still be asleep. Yet there is a trembling in my chest I can't explain. Behemoth touches the lifeless arm of the Sandman, about to hoist him up, when there is a gurgling noise, a sputtering of breath. Behemoth glances around, eyes doughy and confused, unsure where the sound is coming from. He's waking up, Helgamine explains, pointing her long hooked fingertip at the Sandman. The Sandman's eyelids twitch and jerk, his shoulders arch back. We didn't move him fast enough. The potion is already wearing off. Someone screams, and suddenly the vengeful crowd begins to disperse, no one wanting to stick around to risk being put back to sleep. Wolfman and Behemoth and Corpse Kid flee toward the cemetery. Lock, Shock, and Barrel stay a moment more, curious about the sputtering Sandman, before the mayor ushers them away, along with Clown and Grim Reaper. The vampire brothers slink back into the shadows, there one moment, and then gone, while the witch sisters scurry away to their shop, slamming the door shut. The undersea gal slithers up the cobble stones, toward the swamp beyond town. But Jack and I stay where we are. My parents too, even Zero, refuses to dash away into the dark. Out of sight, we watch as the Sandman begins to mutter, voice thick with sleep, trying to recite some long-forgotten lullaby. His big, gray-blue eyes wink open, clouded, roving around him like he's lost his sense of direction and can no longer recall where he is. But when his eyes snap firmly on me, sharp as jagged sticks broke at the end, I take a shivering step back. He remembers me, the one he's been looking for all this time, and now here I am, a few short feet away. With shaking arms, he drags himself upright, moving slowly, and steps free of the fountain, white robes dripping with green fountain water. But his eyes stay settled on me, balancing himself, and I know he's going to lounge. Sorry about that, everyone. That was my alarm. It went off for my medicine. But where were we? Yes. But his eyes stayed settled on me, balancing himself, and I know he's going to lunge at me. He's going to try to pull me apart at the seams, leaving nothing behind. Then he will make his way through Halloween Town, putting everyone back to sleep. I stop breathing, my leaves clattering beneath my ribs. But Jack steps forward and toward the fountain, placing himself between me and the Sandman. My mind begins to race, calculating how quickly I could gather more herbs and make another potion, and how we might trick him into taking it, but there's no time left. Yet, as I peer into the Sandman's eyes, I realize something seems off. The darkness rimming his eyes are gone. The creased shadows of his features now faded. Something has changed. I step around Jack, and the Sandman stretches his arms over his head, yawning, cracking his neck to one side, then the other, clearing his throat. So that's what sleep feels like, he moans. How wondrous. I flash a look at my parents, but they look just as startled, unsure what to do. My father steps forward, careful and cautious. Sandman, he says, eyes squinting. Ah, Albert. The Sandman replies plainly, tone easy, no longer full of sharp-tongued lullabies. It's nice to see you. How have you been? Well, My father stalls, scratching at his temple, then restarts as if he's never heard the Sandman speak this way and is unsure how to respond. You don't seem like yourself, he says at last. The Sandman raises his white, thick eyebrows. I don't feel like myself, he agrees, rubbing a hand down his long white beard, straightening it. I feel strangely rested, and he drops his hand, considering his words with a low slant of his eyebrows. I think I even dreamed. I've never had my own dreams before, and it was delightful. You put everyone to sleep in the human world, my father says, shaking his head, and then the holiday realms too. Did I? The Sandman asks, squinting, like he's trying to recall. I was so desperate for dreams. After spending all those years in the woods, I guess I got a little carried away. His tone was a sheepish, almost embarrassed tinge to it, as if he simply had been caught stealing sugar cookies at bedtime, or tracking swamp mud across the clean floor. My mother squints, eyeing the Sandman. We had to banish you, she says courtly, no kindness in her words. We couldn't allow you to continue stealing dreams. The Sandman nods. He trails off. The Sandman nods, little trails of sand spilling from his pocket. I understand, but it seems... He taps a finger to his temple. I don't feel the same hunger for dreams as I used to. His eyes lift to mine. I've never slept before, never had so much as an afternoon nap. He yawns again, as if recalling all those sleepless years, centuries of putting others to sleep but never resting himself. But now that I have, I've seen my own dreams, and well, it was splendid. Jack tilts his head at the Sandman. You could have just slept yourself, he says bluntly, instead of stealing other people's dreams. The Sandman swallows, settling his shoulders. Dream sand doesn't work on me. None of the usual remedies will do, but you. He directs his eyes back to me, piercing with their cloud white hue. You put me to sleep. His voice catches with emotion, not anger, but something else. Gratitude. I never imagined I could have my own dreams, and now I feel. He rolls his shoulders back. I feel better than I ever have. Unusually clear-headed. Is this how everyone feels after they sleep? His gaze flashes to my parents, then back to me. Sometimes, I reply, carefully, still not entirely sure if we can trust him, if this isn't some trick, just like my decoys, and at any moment he will dive toward Jack and blow what little sand he has left in Jack's face. His mouth sinks and his eyes flash to the ground. I hope you'll all forgive me for stealing your dreams. He drifts forward and holds out his hand to Jack. No hard feelings? But Jack doesn't extend his hand in return. Sally is the one who's owed an apology, he replies. She traveled to every holiday and even the human world, trying to find a way to stop you. The Sandman shifts his eyes back to me, his beard draped long in front of me, a softness in his features that wasn't there before. He is not the same Sandman who hunted me, who tore the fake Sally dolls apart, who likely would have done the same to me if he'd gotten the chance. I'm terribly sorry, he says now, voice low and remorseful, but thank you for putting me to sleep. Having my own dreams was far more satisfying than the ones I've been stealing. Zero hovers beside me, growling. He still doesn't like the Sandman being this close to me, but I can see from my parents' faces that he is no longer the Sandman they remember. The monster they banished from Dreamtown into the woods. He seems suddenly innocuous, harmless really, just a white-haired, white-bearded wisp of a man, with sand spilling from his pockets and a dreamy look in his eyes. Maybe he wasn't the villain of the story after all. He simply needed a long overdue nap. Like a cranky child who's had too many lemon sugar drops and gone too long without sleep. You can't steal any more dreams, I tell him, or we'll have to do far worse than banish you into the forest. The Sandman nods more, sand spilling from his pockets, his fingertips. As long as you'll share the recipe for that sleep tonic of yours, so I can take a nap every now and then and have my own dreams, you have yourself a deal. His face is softened and dreamy, not the wild, cranky expression that mirrored his features only an hour ago. Deal, I say. But when I hold out my hand, the Sandman doesn't shake it. He pulls me into a firm hug, folding his arms warmly and completely around me. And that, my dear friends, is the end of chapter 19. Tune in next video to find out what happens to Dr. Finkelstein in chapter 20. If you haven't already, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe if you aren't. I love having new friends. And until next time, my dear friends, this is Ruby, signing off. Goodbye.